Uh, Today we're in session 8. I'm going to share with you this Daedalus and Icarus story from Canvas. Want to take a minute to read this. So this is Daedalus and Icarus. The labyrinth, from which Theseus escaped by the means of the clue of Aradne, was built by Daedalus, a most skillful artificer. It was an edifice with numberless winding passages and turnings opening into one another, and seeming to have neither beginning nor end, like the river Meander, which returns on itself and flows now onward, now backward, in its course to the sea. Daedalus built the labyrinth for King Minos, but afterwards lost favor of the king, and was shut up in a tower. He was contrived to make his escape from his prison, but could not leave the island by sea, as the king kept strict watch on all the vessels, and permitted none to sail without being carefully searched. Minos may control the land and sea, said Daedalus, but not the regions of the air. I will try that way. So he set out to work to fabricate wings for himself and his young son Icarus. He wrought feathers together, beginning with the smallest and adding larger, so as to form an increasing surface. The larger ones he secured with thread, and the smaller with wax, and gave the whole a gentler curvature like the wings of a bird. Icarus, the boy, stood and looked on, sometimes running to gather up the feathers which the wind had blown away, and then handling the wax and working it over with his fingers. By his play, impeding his father in his labors. When at last the work was done, the artist, waving his wings, found himself buoyed upward, and hung suspended, poising himself on the beaten air. He next equipped his son in the same manner, and taught him how to fly, as a bird tempts her young ones from the lofty nest into the air. When all was prepared for the flight, he said, Icarus, my son, I charge you to keep a moderate height, nor for if you fly too low, the damp will clog your wings, and if too high, the heat will melt them. Keep near me, and you'll be safe. While he gave him these instructions and fitted the wings to his shoulders, the face of the father was wet with tears, and his hands trembled. He kissed the boy, not knowing that it was for the last time. Then, rising on his wings, he flew off, encouraging him to follow, and looked back from his own flight to see how his son managed his wings. As they flew, the plowman stopped his work to gaze, and the shepherd leaned on his staff and watched them, astonished at the sight, and thinking they were gods who could thus cleave the air. They passed Samos and Delos on the left and Lebithos on the right. When the boy, exulting in his career, began to lead the guidance of his companion and soar upward as if to reach heaven, the nearness of the blazing sun softened the wax which held the feathers together, and they came off. He fluttered with his arms, but no feathers remained to hold the air. While his mouth uttered cries to his father, it was submerged in the blue waters of the sea, which thenceforth was called by his name. His father cried, Icarus, Icarus, where are you? At last he saw the feathers floating on the water, and bitterly lamenting his own arts, he buried the body and called the land Icaria, in memory of his child. Daedalus arrived safely in Sicily, where he built a temple to Apollo and hung up his wings, an offering to the god. Daedalus was so proud of his achievements that he could not bear the idea of a rival. His sister had placed her son Perdix under his charge to be taught the mechanical arts. He was an apt scholar and gave striking evidence of ingenuity. Walking on the seashore, he picked up the spine of a fish. Imitating it, he took a piece of iron and notched it on the edge, and thus invented the saw. He put two pieces of iron together, collecting them at one end with a rivet and sharpening the other ends, and made a pair of compasses. Daedalus was so envious of his nephew's performances that he took an opportunity, when they were together one day at the top of a high tower, to push him off. But Minerva, who favors ingenuity, saw him falling and arrested his fate by changing him into a bird called after his name, the partridge. The bird does not build his nest in trees nor take lofty flights, but nestles in the hedges, and mindful of his fall, avoids high places. So the story of Daedalus. A little different, kind of sad and kind of sick how this uncle and father cared for his children. All right. But I want to take a minute now to share with you the video of this. We're going to make some comparisons and some contrasting ideas here. Sorry. Need to add audio.
Could we fly like Talos said?
Talos is dead.
How did he fall, Father?
You killed him. No! No!
Father?
It was a game. We were playing at flying. You killed him. And in his rage, Daedalus flung his blanket over the floor. They struggled and fought until there was a terrible crack and the great bird's neck snapped. Now your brothers will come for you. And we'll have feathers enough and wings enough.
Father!
Wings of our own. Do you hear me, son? Wings of our own. We'll fly. Love him, Daedalus. Love him to death. The next morning, Daedalus trapped more birds and stole their feathers, found a swarm of bees and stole their hive. He stuck the feathers to spines of wood with beeswax, moulding each feather tip perfectly together, carefully copying the wings.
More feathers, Father.
Oh, leave it. Leave them.
I'm sorry, he's only trying to help.
Yes, but it's too important. If it weren't so important...
If I weren't so clumsy, if I was Talos.
Now, my son, please listen to me carefully.
You always think I'm not listening, but I am. I really am.
Fly behind me and keep close. Don't fly too high or too low. If you fly too low, the sea spray will weigh down the feathers. If you fly too high, the sun will melt the wax. What did I say?
If I fly too high, the sun will melt the wax. You're squeezing me. We're not saying goodbye, are we?
Daedalus clung to his son on the hill. Then he kissed Icarus, and it seemed as if some great bird was feeding its chick mouth to mouth, as birds do, or that Daedalus was willing his knowledge into his clumsy son. Then they turned and ran to the cliff edge and up, out and away from the lands controlled by Minos, flying.
I'm flying!
Stay close! Not too low, not too high. Stay close! But Icarus did not stay close. As the earth shrank beneath him, he beat on, up, past clouds, past listening, past promises. Icarus flew on alone, higher and higher and higher, towards the sun. And bead by golden bead, the wax started to melt. Icarus! Too late. Icarus fell down and down into the sea that bears his name. Icarus!
He died?
He died.
That's terrible. Why did he fly too high? He promised he wouldn't fly too high.
I think when Talus dropped from the sad heights above Athens, Icarus was already falling, as if a single thread held them all together. Talus fell, Icarus fell, Daedalus fell.
All right, sorry about that. I know you get to only listen to it, didn't get to hear it or get to see it, the whole thing. So please, if you get a chance, check that out later on. But Daedalus and Icarus. I want to go to the next story with Echo and Narcissus. We're going to read this to you, and then I'll share the screen with you so you can see the short video. So Echo and Narcissus. Echo was a beautiful nymph, fond of the woods and hills, where she devoted herself to woodland sports. She was a favorite of Diana and attended her in the chase. But Echo had one failing. She was fond of talking, and whether in chat or argument would have the last word. One day Juno was seeking her husband, who she had reason to fear was using himself among the nymphs. Echo by her talk contrived to detain the goddess till the nymphs made their escape. When Juno discovered it, she passed sentence upon Echo in these words: "You shall forfeit the use of that tongue with which you have cheated me, except for that one purpose you are so fond of. Reply. You shall still have the last word, but no power to speak the first." The nymph saw Narcissus, a beautiful youth. As he pursued the chase upon the mountain, she loved him and followed his footsteps. Oh, how she longed to address him in the softest accents and win him to converse, but it was not in her power. She waited with impatience for him to speak first, and had her answer ready. One day the youth, being separated from his companions, shouted aloud, "Who's here?" Echo replied, "Here." Narcissus, looking around, but seeing no one, called out, "Come." Echo answered, "Come." As no one came, Narcissus called again, "Why do you shun me?" Echo asked the same question. "Let us join one another," said the youth. The maid answered with all of her heart in the same words, and hastened to the spot, ready to throw her arms about his neck. He started back, exclaiming, "Hands off! I'd rather die than you should have me." "Have me," said she. It was all in vain. He left her, and she went to hide her blushes in the recesses of the woods. From that time forth she lived in caves and among the mountain cliffs. Her form faded with grief, till last all her flesh shrank away. Her bones were changed into rocks, and there was nothing left of her but her voice. With that, she is still ready to reply to anyone who calls her, and keeps up her old habit of having the last word. Narcissus' cruelty in this case was not the only instance. He shunned all the rest of the nymphs, as he had done poor Echo. One day a maiden who had vain endeavor to attract him uttered a prayer that he might become some time or other feel it was to love and meet to One day a maiden who had in vain endeavored to attract him uttered a prayer that he might sometime or other feel what it was to love and meet no return of affection. The avenging goddess heard and granted the prayer. There was a clear fountain with water like silver, to which the shepherds never drove their flocks, nor the mountain goats resorted, nor any of the beasts of the forest. Neither was it defaced with the fallen leaves or branches, but the grass grew fresh around it, and the rock sheltered it from the sun. Hither came one day the youth, fatigued with hunting, heated and thirsty. He stooped down to drink, and saw his own image in the water. He thought it was some beautiful water spirit living in the fountain. He stood gazing with admiration at those bright eyes, those locks curled like locks of Bacchus or Apollo, the rounded cheeks, the ivory neck, the parted lips, and the glow of health and exercise over all. He fell in love with himself. He brought his lips near to take a kiss. He plunged his arms to embrace the beloved object. It fled the touch, but returned again after a moment and renewed the fascination. He could not tear himself away. He lost all thought of food or rest, while he hovered over the brink of the fountain, gazing upon his own image. He talked with the supposed spirit. "Why, beautiful being, do you shun me? Surely my face is not one to repel you. The nymphs love me, and you yourself look not indifferent upon me. When I stretch forth my arms, you do the same, and you smile upon me and answer my beckonings with a like." His tears fell into the water and disturbed the image. As he saw it depart, he exclaimed, "Stay, I entreat you. Let me at least gaze upon you, if I may not touch you." With this, and much more of the same kind, he cherished the flame that consumed him, so by degrees he lost his color, his vigor, and the beauty which formerly had so charmed the nymph Echo. She kept near him, however. When he exclaimed, "Alas, alas," she answered him with the same words. He pined away and died, and when his shade passed the Stygian river, it leaned over the boat to catch a look at itself in the waters. The nymphs mourned for him, especially the water nymphs, and when they smote their breasts, Echo smote hers also. They prepared a funeral pile, and would have burned the body, but it was nowhere to be found. But in its place a flower, purple within and surrounded with white leaves, which bears the name and preserves the memory of Narcissus. All right, I'm going to attempt to share with you the video then of Echo and Narcissus.
Echo was one of the many nymphs that lived in the forests of ancient Greece, and she had an extraordinary talent for talking. In other words, she could tell great stories, but she was a bit of a chatterbox.
valleys and the hills. It's just marvelous. That reminds me of the story I was going to tell you about.
One day, Hera, queen of the gods, came down from Mount Olympus in search of her husband Zeus, the great king of the gods. Hera was in a hurry and was not what you would call a patient woman. Every time she tried to ask Echo if she had seen Zeus, the well-meaning but not very tactful Echo managed to interrupt her.
Nymph, have you seen... It has been so long since you visited our woods, and we are honored to see you. Yes, naturally. But what I want to know is... Have you ever noticed how sweet the air is when the west wind passes over the fields of lavender? Look, child, I want to know... Lavender is my very favorite herb. I'm never feeling nervous or tense.
Unfortunately for Echo, Hera was not the kind of goddess who liked to stand around chatting with talkative nymphs.
And I also... Words! You have far too many words for one little nymph. Nobody else can get a word in edgewise. Well, I'll fix that. From now on, you will only be able to repeat what has just been said to you. That will make you a better listener. Now leave me.
Echo tried to plead with Hera for forgiveness, but all she could say was,
Now leave me.
Go!
Scram!
Poor Echo wandered through the forest alone. Her life seemed all but over until one day she spotted a handsome boy named Narcissus, who was hunting in the woods. Instantly, she fell deeply in love. She wanted desperately to tell him so, but of course she couldn't say a single word until someone else spoke first. She would just have to wait for the right moment. What Echo didn't know was that many a girl before her had tried to attract the attention of the splendid Narcissus, but it seemed that no one could catch his eye. That is, until the day that he happened to see his own reflection in a pool of water. Of all the pretty faces he'd seen, Narcissus had never found one more fascinating than his own.
Perfection. Utter perfection. You're fabulous.
This was Echo's chance. From her hiding place behind a rock, she repeated the words that she so longed to say.
You're fabulous.
Narcissus grew more and more enchanted with his own image. He never once looked away from his reflection, for he was now sure it had spoken back to him.
I've never said this to anyone. I believe I love you.
I love you.
But as Narcissus reached into the water to try to touch the face that so fascinated him, it simply disappeared.
Don't leave me.
Dismayed at the sudden loss of his only love, Narcissus plunged into the deep pool. Echo rushed out from behind the rock, but it was too late. All she could say were the words that she last heard.
Don't leave me.
Echo's grief was unbearable. She wandered through the mountains without eating or drinking, and slowly she faded away until all that was left of her was her voice. According to the ancient Greeks, Echo's spirit still exists in all the mountains and caves of the world, and you can even hear her today, repeating the last words of anyone who calls out to her. Hello! As for Narcissus, he didn't disappear forever either. In fact, a very strange thing happened. On the very spot where he was last seen, a beautiful flower grew. And as it grew, it leaned over the pool, still trying to get a look at itself. The flower, of course, is called the Narcissus.
All right, those are our two stories today. Echo and Narcissus, or Narcissus, and Daedalus and Icarus. So, what I'd like you to do for the rest of the period is to go into session 8 click on the Session 8 prompt. And I'd like you to copy and paste this into a Google Doc. So I have here, in Greek mythology, stories are told by elders and are passed down to each generation through an oral presentation. During the reading and watching these Greek stories, take notes, be able to explain the moral of each story. So I'd like you to please explain and summarize the story itself and then the moral that you need to learn from Daedalus and Icarus and Echo and Narcissus. And then in session 9, we are going to be reading and watching Prometheus and Pandora, and then Theseus and Minotaur. All right. And so that's the assignment for today. I'd like you to get that wrapped up, get it completed.